You're listening to the Opioid Matrix, a journey into the rabbit hole, a Rigaku podcast, hosted by Michael Brown. This is an unfiltered conversation that examines how illicit narcotic trafficking is affecting every aspect of our society, including substance addiction, treatment programs, and law enforcement. Let's unpack the issue together.
Welcome to the Opioid Matrix. As fentanyl claims more lives every day, some states like Colorado have passed laws that make the possession of 4 grams or less of a controlled substance a level 1 drug misdemeanor, which at one point also included fentanyl. Now, 2018, fentanyl overdose fatalities in Colorado reached an average of 9 individuals a month. In 2021, approximately 1,200 individuals suffered a fatal fentanyl overdose. Now, my guest today, Andrea Thomas, unfortunately knows all too well the dangers of fentanyl. She lost her daughter, Ashley, to an illicit oxycodone pill laced with fentanyl on June 11th, 2018. Andrea is now the co-founder for Voices of Awareness Foundation, which promotes awareness about counterfeit drugs, illicit fentanyl, and self-harm. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. I appreciate you having me here today. This is such an important topic, and we need, all hands on deck, everyone to talk about fentanyl and fentanyl prevention and what's taking place around the United States about, with this fentanyl crisis.
Can you talk to us a little bit how you got into your awareness prevention role?
So in 2018, I lost my daughter, Ashley, to a half of a counterfeit pill made with fentanyl. I didn't know what fentanyl was in 2018. I'd never heard of it. And I was a young mother for having a 32-year-old daughter. We discussed alcohol. We discussed the effects of drugs, all of those things. And it's been an open topic in our family. Ashley struggled with alcoholism for quite some time. And as a result of that, she had pancreatitis, acute pancreatitis. And she was in a good space. She was working her way through recovery. And, 10 days before she loses her life, she's posting, "Today is a good day," right? From the front seat of her car. And 10 days later, that's exactly where they find her poisoned by fentanyl. So I get this call about my daughter, and I don't even believe it to be true, because how can a pill kill my daughter? At the time, we didn't even know it was a half. We thought it was one pill. And that doesn't make sense to me. Everyone's taken a pill, a pain pill, or a medication of some sort. And about, the day of Ashley's service, my girlfriends took me into the bathroom, and they showed me this public service announcement on their phone from our local PD. And it had a picture of these 2 blue pills. And that was the first I'd ever seen of it. And it said that to be careful of these pills, they were killing people, and potential for sudden death, cause sudden death. And I knew at that moment, it wasn't just Ashley, right, that was dying. There was someone else. And so I reached out to the press the following day. And I remember my girlfriend standing there when I woke up the day after Ashley's service, and there they stood with a cup of coffee, right, waiting for me, not knowing how I was going to be. And I think I was just as worried for them as they were for me. And I knew that was kind of a defining moment, right? Was I going to get back in the bed, or were we going to find out what happened, tell other people? And my daughter's life was not going to be in vain because of a piece of a pill. So we started and have not stopped since. And that was Voices for Awareness that I started right away. And last year, we started a project called Facing Fentanyl, which is a project of Voices for Awareness, where we have created the National Fentanyl Prevention and Awareness Day that's on August 21st. And that's not just my work. That's the work of about 200 other affected families that have started organizations like mine, bringing awareness and prevention to the United States, and then much other support, the DEA, Homeland Security, on and on and on and on. But together we work not just on the 21st of August, but all year long to bring prevention to Americans.
I've talked to a lot of parents who have been exactly in your position. And, Ashley represents that new paradigm of individuals who are not drug users, but who took that occasional pill thinking it was something, and it turned out to be fentanyl, as opposed to the long-term traditional drug users, maybe someone who's transitioned from heroin to fentanyl. It's a completely different paradigm, but this new paradigm is taking kids at an alarming rate. We have the education, we have the public awareness, but I still see kids dying. What more needs to be done from your perspective?
Well, we need that in-person prevention, right? Because you talk about this new paradigm, and because the drug landscape has changed so much, we have to learn how to change with it. And so we're not out there saying don't do drugs, which really I would love to scream from the rooftops, because if there was ever a time not to do drugs, it would be now. My partner, Michael Fiore, is in recovery. He's 20 years addicted to heroin.
Right.
And he's alive and had a chance for recovery. He's doing excellent. And we're not seeing the rate of recovery with fentanyl like we did old drugs. So because it's either so highly addictive from onset, right, from the first use, so addictive that eventually you're going to die from this drug, or it kills you the first use. So the unsuspecting part and the rate of addiction with using this drug has increased phenomenally, right? It's like it's the worst drug we've ever seen for its addiction properties. So where are we going with this? We've got to get back into in-person prevention. In the beginning, we were just working, stop fentanyl, right? Let's stop it from coming into the United States. Well, now we've surpassed that time. It's flooded into the United States. There's so much. The seizures we're seeing are just a minute amount of what's actually reaching coming into our country. So we do have to address now the people that are addicted, because it's growing and growing every day. Stopping the fentanyl from coming in, but prevention, stopping it before it starts. And that's what we try to do in most of our work. We work legislation and we work with law enforcement and all the things, but prevention, get to this youth.
So, I mentioned earlier in Colorado, 2018, they passed this bill which decriminalized personal use amounts of narcotics, which initially included fentanyl. How do we balance, right? We say fentanyl's bad. It's coming in illegally. We need more enforcement, more prevention. But at the same time, we have states like Colorado, Utah, California, which are passing bills which say, no, it's okay to have personal amount use of narcotics. We'll give you a place to shoot up. We'll give you Narcan if you overdose. They're taking away the negative stigma associated with severe drug abuse. And that's obviously going to encourage our teens to say, well, it's legal.
That's right.
So why not experiment? So how do we balance this conflict between what some states want to decriminalize and make drug use what I call the normalization of drug use, but then we go to Montana and Florida, which have new penalty regulations for fentanyl distribution. 4 grams can get you almost 5 to 6 years, if not more.
Well, accountability is certainly a part that is important to me, right? The dealer that was responsible for bringing the pills in my daughter's case, was responsible for many other lives. He knew what he was doing. He knew that it was killing people, and he continued to do it. He himself, not a user. Mm-hmm. And so someone like that, there must be accountability there. We have to continue respect for human life. We can't disregard that with no accountability. People that are using and buying and selling off the street for their own personal use, that's a different story. But again, case by case, right? Because you have to be accountable. If I got in my car and killed somebody today because I drank a couple beers before driving, I would certainly need to be accountable for that. Doesn't make me, I didn't purposely do it, but I did harm someone and take their life. And so that accountability has to be there. States like Colorado, the people of Colorado did not even know this law was going into place for the most part, because if something doesn't affect you, you don't pay attention to it. So was not a bill that was or a law put into place because we voted it that way. When that first happened, I was shocked. It happened after I lost my daughter. No one was talking about fentanyl in our state. And then they, they make 4 grams and under is punishable by only a misdemeanor. I spent many months in court looking for the distributor in my daughter's case. And what I saw were the same people coming in and out every day. It wasn't that the arrests weren't being made and law enforcement wasn't doing their job. They were walking in, walking out, zero accountability, PR bonds, and coming right back in just days later. I saw that for months and months and months. So the recidivism rate, awful. We began working on legislation for these laws, and what I learned and was shocked to know was that people that didn't have information on fentanyl, that were not educated on fentanyl, were making these laws. They were the ones that were working on these laws and writing this. So they did not understand, even with the help of affected families, that there is no safe dose of fentanyl. So now we're down to 1 milligram in Colorado. But certainly I don't see that there's a safe dose anywhere. If your choice is to die or be so addicted that you can't stop using, to me, no way around that. There's no safe dose. So we have to look at this from the top to the bottom. And bottom line, top of the chain is people are dying rapidly from this. So providing safe access for them to use, and nothing safe about that.
No.
Nothing safe. You can, Narcan them. You can bring them back to life if they're in an overdose situation or a poisoning situation. But why are we continuing to let that happen? We need to help them in other ways. And that's my belief. And, it's kind of 50-50 around the
It's a tough mix because your perspective as a parent of a child who was not a traditional drug user is much different than the individuals and relatives and parents of kids or young adults who are traditional drug users. Spoke to a mother recently who lost her son in the homeless population of LA. He got on methamphetamine and he just disappeared in a wave of people. But we see the homeless population increasing, in my opinion, directly towards the administrative policies of that state. Decriminalization, basically legalizing homelessness, legalizing the use of narcotics, no attention and treatment for mental health issues. So again, you can do all you can do, but we seem to be coming back to the same point. Our legislators are passing bills which are killing this country, literally. And I'd like to give them some slack and say they don't know what they're doing, but they're supposed to be really smart people. A lot of attorneys, all college graduates, maybe a few master's degrees in there. You and I certainly can understand it. Our paid representatives get paid to understand it, but it's not getting fixed.
Yeah, and that's why we spend so much time meeting with law enforcement and trying to bridge the gap, right? Just like many of our families didn't understand why investigation couldn't take place for their kids. They didn't understand that the laws weren't in place for law enforcement to proceed with some of these investigations. They didn't understand that after law enforcement could come in, DEA could come in and get all the facts, have all the evidence. But the next step is that the DOJ has to take the case, right? And if they're not willing to do that, then it doesn't matter how much evidence that you have. So from the affected family side, and now I know all these things, but new parents coming in, they don't know that. And just like law enforcement gets jaded, right? How many times, how many arrests do you make in a day? And how many of those people are telling you the truth? 0, right? So they get jaded also. So we try to bridge that gap, working with law enforcement, speaking with our DEAs and, other stakeholders so that we can, or not DEA, DAs, so that we can bridge that gap to let them know what's happening on both sides. And that's really the key, I think, is working together. If you've not been affected by a fentanyl poisoning in your family, if you don't understand it, we have an entire population that thinks this is a prescription drug that we're talking about because of how the media perceives it. We watch the news and they'll show graphics of prescription fentanyl. That's not what we're talking about. People that think that drugs are only affecting those that are using, people on the street, the addicts, right? They're
Right.
not understand that it can happen to their 14-year-old and they could wake up in the bed in their home the next morning and in this bedroom to them, their son or daughter could be poisoned by fentanyl from a pill that they bought simply on an app without even leaving their home. And so we've got to come out in a bigger way, much like we did COVID. We keep saying the same thing over, but we don't have another example. During COVID, we came out in a week. We all knew wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart, and wear a mask. Right? Why aren't we pushing this with fentanyl? And we've been saying it's the most dangerous drug out there or that we've ever seen. And look, xylazine is being added to this now. No reversal. Even worse. Who could even imagine?
Yeah, only thing I've seen close to this is, I worked with DEA. I was in Detroit in the early 90s, mid 90s, was crack cocaine, right? Extremely addictive, absolutely destroyed the inner city, especially the Black communities of brown and Black individuals. That, in my opinion, was the first opioid crisis, and it just devastated cities. But the addiction didn't kill you. Maybe in a couple of years. So you had that opportunity. The individual had an opportunity to get treatment, to get the rehab, But now, as you said, with fentanyl, 2 milligrams is a deadly dose, but certainly 1 milligram can kill the right person with the right physiology. And these pills don't have gram warnings on them. You don't know what's in a pill. I mean, obviously, millions of pills are coming in. People are taking them and not dying, but becoming addicted to fentanyl and then moving to fentanyl powder. And then we see the xylazine being mixed in, which is a whole host of other problems. But, as an agent, I look at where's it all coming from, right? Until we can go after the cartels, reinforce our border security, what you're doing is good effort, but is it going to make an impact without going to the source? Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, every day. I feel some days like we've been spinning our wheels because 5 years ago when I started this, I thought, well, if we can get the people to know, it'll stop, right? We'll address the problem easily. I thought that in an urgency, so urgent all the time and desperate for answers and to get someone's attention about it. And now we've gotten, to Congress, we've gotten to our legislatures. We haven't hit all of the American public, but we've certainly reached the White House, and we have also reached our senators. And we're at a standstill. We have a lot of legislation out there, but we're not getting a lot of solutions. And a lot of that legislation is being ignored and not taken seriously. So as an affected family member, I can't sanction China. I can't stop the flow of this into our illegal borders and our legal borders, right? Because we have a lot of gateways into the United States, over 200. And fentanyl is coming in all of, not just the illegal border. So it is my belief that we have to sanction these countries that are making these precursors and sending them into Mexico for them to be shipped into our country. China's the main one, but there are others. And we don't see this addiction problem, this death problem, poisoning problem happening in China that we've heard about. So I am assuming that it's not allowed there. We don't have a lot of information about what's going on in China, but I don't think they have a tolerance for it. And I feel like we've become criminal our own selves. We've surpassed the time where we should have done more about this. And there comes a point where we are participating in the deaths of these hundreds of thousands of Americans.
You can almost say, at least in my opinion, we're unwitting co-conspirators.
Yes.
I can tell you about China. China has a major cocaine and methamphetamine problem. But last year, they executed roughly 300 people for dealing narcotics in any amount. You won't find any Asian country that tolerates drug use, drug distribution like we do here in the United States. And I think that's a big part of the problem. We have become a culture that just accepts all kinds of behavior, bad or good. And now we justify bad behavior as, well, they're substance abuse users. Let's just let them be that, like Europe. And you can't beat them, kind of a join them mentality. Plus, we're talking about, you're talking about the Don Quixote situation here. Drug trafficking goes far beyond just trafficking. You get into the political aspects, the political relationship with China, with Mexico. You get into the private commerce relationships with the carrier companies that move parcels that carry narcotics, the vessels. You get into trade with Mexico, NAFTA, right? In order to get to the narcotic issue, which is way, way, way down on the list, you've got to move a few things out of the way, which represent billions of dollars in trade and investment to the United States. So could you say that these overdose deaths are simply collateral damage to a larger political agenda?
Yes, I believe that to be. And, we don't go around saying that all the time in our work because we would get a lot of doors closed in our faces, right? We've just got to get in. Going back to the beginning of, where you started, where you were heading with, we talk about like in Colorado, when we were working that legislation, and there was the other side of the aisle that saw us as we want to arrest everybody. We can't arrest our way out of this situation. Well, because we didn't want to give someone a felony. We didn't want to hit our youth with felonies, right? Because that would be so difficult for them to overcome. Well, we made bigger of that than it is. I remember standing before a judge and begging him to please incarcerate my daughter for 30 days and not let her walk out again. She had cut her ankle bracelet off. How is that? Like you just do that and there's no accountability? And I knew if she walked out that day, she would drink again, and it might be the time that it killed her. So I remember begging them to please keep her so I could find somewhere for her to go, some type of recovery in, the time that they had her. And they, in fact, did it. They didn't follow through on what they said they did. And Ashley came out, and now, here's where we are. She's gone. But and I would rather a felony. I would rather a short stint in jail than the death of my child, because we can recover from all those things. We can't recover from death. And many times when we're speaking to, I was at a roundtable discussion with a senator who I will not say his name recently, but there was a big to-do about him. And when I spoke to him about some of the issues, he relayed to me that he really did not have any solutions, and he didn't really have much authority to do anything. And I thought to myself, why have we sat here for the last 2 hours and made such a to-do, and we're not really looking for solutions? I think that sadly, fentanyl is moving towards, if we don't make some big decisions here, serious decisions, that we're going to move towards the other drugs. It's just another drug. And the deaths will continue. And how can that be? Hundreds of thousands of people basically vanishing without the attention of the people that can make some difference here.
Well, it's really a political battle right now. I mean, we know all the facts. The fentanyl's coming in, other drugs are still coming in. But like I said, you take New York, for example, they have two, safe injection site locations. If you talk to the neighbors there, they will say the quality of their life has gone down to zero. There are substance users hanging out. There are drug dealers on a corner, open air drug trafficking. And yes, the centers I think they've prevented 127 fatalities, but they didn't prevent the overdoses from occurring in the first place. So people are basically checking into a drug use hotel to have monitored drug use and then bring them back to life if they have an overdose, only to do the same thing the next day. I was recently in Kensington Park in Philadelphia, block after block of individuals on the street openly injecting heroin and fentanyl, and many of them had necrosis from xylazine. And I asked one young lady, she could have been more than 25. She had all her front teeth knocked out from someone who stole her drug money, and she had a beginning necrosis on the back of her calf. And I said, why don't you go home and go to the hospital and get treatment? She said, well, if I go to the hospital, I can't get the fentanyl. I said, but your leg could rot off. She's like, I don't care about that.
Because
25 years old, and I don't know if she's still alive today. So again, Andrea, we come back to the awareness, but how do we get past the the stalemate of action, because we have cities, mayors, district attorneys who are pushing this progressive agenda, which is dragging us all down.
So we give clean needles, right? The idea behind the clean needle is that we prevent you from getting AIDS. We prevent you from everything that can happen from using a dirty needle, right? But we're not going to be able to give you a safe dose of fentanyl, right? Because we're killing these people. We're killing these people. And working with people in recovery that we have begun doing recently in the last year, my group has, they're coming forward with their lived experience. So we have brought the two stories together, right? The lived experience for going through recovery and the lived experience from losing a child. And that's how we've been able to reach people. But I don't know the answers to these things. I do know we have to stop assisting in the death of people by thinking giving them a clean pipe or a clean needle is the help that they need, because we are just assisting them in death. That is the end of the road, is going to be death. We're not giving them recovery. We're not opening up other options for them. Bringing them in and just watching them use to potentially reverse an overdose they may go into is not helping anything. And where we've gotten to this, like you said, trying to normalize this in our society, I can't even fathom that. I just returned from New York last night and was in a park with 1,500 kids, and the NYPD is there, and they are trying to give a foundation, right, in this community. Not specifically talking about fentanyl, other than us being there, but giving these kids a foundation so that they know they can reach out for help, and that there are people in their community that care. That was a beautiful thing to see, but we need a continuation of that, because I don't know how we're going to stop fentanyl now from coming into the United States. But I do know that if we get in our kids' face and we follow through at schools and at home, if people choose and know about, if they had the information, why wouldn't we want to save our kids? If you got a 911 reverse call right now at your house because there was a mass murderer outside taking little kids, we would make our kids stay inside. If they had information about fentanyl, maybe they could talk to their kids, and maybe they could keep an eye out, because families don't even know. Pick up the phone and the drug's coming right to my house. People don't know that. We've got to get the information out there. And that's why we are steadfast with prevention. It's all that we know that works.
No, I think at this point, you're absolutely right, because I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective, we're not even close to stemming fentanyl. I was on the job for 32 years. We couldn't stem the flow of cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine coming into the country because we didn't go and deal with it directly. So it's going to come in. And this border situation is drawing CBP resources away from checkpoints. Fentanyl comes in the country primarily concealed in cars and cargo. So the cartels strategically are sending more cars to the border because they know they won't get checked. Once they get through that checkpoint, they're going to Chicago, they're going to New York, they're going to Colorado. Millions and millions of fentanyl pills are coming in this country literally every day. And it's just by, I don't know how, I think we've gotten lucky, because as many pills come in this country, we haven't seen equal amount of overdoses. But if they ever get that formula wrong, they get a bad batch with 2 milligrams in 1 million pills, that could be catastrophic.
I think about that. I think about the bad batch, right? Because to me, every single one of those pills came from a bad batch. So, the weapon of mass destruction idea. I remember the night that Ashley died, and my husband, he's an ex-bomb tech, right? He was fired for about 15, 20 years. And part of his job, and a bomb technician. So we were sitting at the table, and I'm still, I can't wrap my head around this pill killing my daughter. And he said it was, poison, Andrea, very similar to anthrax, right? And he didn't know about fentanyl either, but the only way that he could understand this was to break it down as a poison and a weapon of mass destruction. And, soon after Ashley's death, we talked about this. What if this could get into our water supply? What if it was emitted through the air? All of the things that could happen. And at that point, we didn't even have a full understanding of it, because there wasn't a lot of information out there.
Sure.
Affected families, for the most part, lose a child. If they didn't know about fentanyl, then they become experts because the rest of their days are spent finding out about this drug and all the people that it's killing. So he instilled that into me right away. But there were no other families around me. There was no one talking about this. And a couple of years into my work, I came across some people. There was a huge group of us that met in Washington, D.C. For one of our organizations that's out there. They had a China rally, they called it. It was a meeting at a rally at the Chinese embassy, fentanyl related. And there was a man there that's a good friend of mine now talking about weapon of mass destruction and fentanyl. And this team of people all believed it was poisoning too. And I felt like I met my people, right? Because here I'd been telling people that it's my legislature, anyone that would listen, and they thought I was crazy. Well, it's not so crazy because any way that you look at it, if you look at it as a weapon of mass destruction where it got into the air and killed hundreds at a time, or if you looked at it on a daily basis, it's still killing hundreds of it at a time, a pill at a time, or a drug at a time. It is a weapon of mass destruction. And that does need to be addressed. And I'm happy to see, some of our governors and states coming out and addressing that issue. And like you mentioned, Montana is one of those states, and we've been working closely with them. And even though every state's behind the power curve on this, I got a call from Montana last year around this time saying, we don't have any asks, but what do we do? What are you doing? And we told them they needed boots on the ground. And pretty websites from Attorney General's office are great for parents to look at or their constituents, but the kids don't go there before they use. And so we talked to them about in-person prevention, and they've been doing everything they can to accommodate that. And it's out of the norm. I don't usually see that. More states are following now.
Yeah, that's really going to be the key. You have to get the state governors who are actually fighting against this to get them together and build that national coalition. You can't do this alone. Governor DeSantis and the governor of Montana, other like Texas, Governor Abbott, these are all individuals who understand the dangers of narcotics and are working hard, but you got to get these states to start talking to each other.
We do something that's pretty simple. One of our parent projects this year is an opioid reversal kit. And so the naloxone is in it. Well, certainly that should be everywhere where people gather, but it should be at our schools. We know from our press in the last year that in California, we lost a lot of students. It's not just happening there. Those are the ones bringing it. In the school areas or in class. It happened in Colorado too. So we donate these kits that have naloxone in them. But what's different about our kits is that it's got this one brochure. It's got the information to start the conversation for the schools for this to happen. It's not that difficult. By watching a film that many of us use. We use this film, Dead on Arrival, that my very good friends are in. And it's 20 minutes. We bring kids into an auditorium or in their classroom, show them the film, talk to them about our experiences. I have Michael with me, and he can talk to them about, choices that he made versus choices that they should make. And this is just an open conversation with kids. That's simple. It doesn't cost a ton of money. It costs $0. No one funds us. Our travel and those things we pay for, but nobody funds us. So we're still achieving these things. And I'm not the only one. There's hundreds of parents out there like me that are doing the same thing. Why can't we do that? Why can't we hit all this? Why can't that be a priority? That's where our kids are. Just go to them. Tell them. It's a first step.
Now, along the issue of kids, teenagers, and medication, let's take a deeper dive into that. I saw a report the other day. Roughly over 1 million teenage kids are on some sort of prescription drug, anxiety, depression, anti-suicide. Are we predisposing our children to take prescription drugs, which is leading to, searching out illicit pills on the street, which happen to be fentanyl? It seems to me if we can reverse that, go back and get our kids off of all these pills, stop indoctrinating them to think that if I just take this pill, I'll feel better.
Exactly. So that's what happened with the prescription opioid problem, right? The perfect
Right.
storm. We had the prescription pill crisis. Then we pull back on prescribing for that, and people begin to go to the streets. And here's our cartel, creative as ever with these counterfeit pills, and then adding it to the other drugs. And here we sit. We've got an Adderall shortage. We've got an Adderall shortage because so many of our kids are prescribed Adderall.
Yeah.
When I lost my daughter, Ashley, she was our oldest daughter. My youngest daughter was taking a prescription for depression. And I had a wonderful pediatrician, so I trusted her. We had counseling with that, all of the above, everything that made it sound safe to me, right? We were doing everything right, I thought. And then I watched a video about prescription Xanax and how these things are approved. I went home that night and pulled my daughter off those prescriptions. I thought I will never give her another pill. And really what she needed was coping skills. We needed to do better with coping skills and my child. So even though she has a tendency to maybe need a little bit more, we worked without those medications. And, I didn't even know then that you couldn't just pull her off of these pills, that you couldn't just stop them because it was so early into what I was learning. But it can be done. There are other alternatives. My husband just had a 6 bypass a couple of years ago. I didn't know you could have a 6 bypass or that was a thing. But he medicated with Tylenol for that first week. He didn't need fentanyl. He didn't need excessive pain pills. He started with the Tylenol and it worked as much as anything else would have. So we have to ask questions in going into those doctors' offices. We tend to just give it away, looking for the answer with these pills, right? Ask questions. You are your own advocate. And, just like with the doctor, law enforcement, I never thought I would go disagree with law enforcement ever in my life or bring these conversations to DEA. It's okay. You can have an uplifting conversation. I always had a respect at that higher level and just believe what they had to say. Well, there's more to it. So ask questions, be involved. And the pills are not the answer to everything. There are other alternatives. And we had them years and years before we had all these pills. So it can be done.
No, I can remember, growing up, I don't want to date myself, but, 1977, 76, you come in the house. Hey, I'm tired, Mom. I'm depressed, had a bad day at school. Well, go outside, run around. Yeah. That was the answer. Take an aspirin. Nobody was on Adderall or Xanax, And this brings me to my next question. How much is social media playing into this and creating anxiety and depression and the 24-hour live stream that our kids are involved in, right? They can go on Snapchat and TikTok and buy narcotics using emojis, which the parents don't even understand.
Well, what I was just talking about with my youngest daughter, she was the one that was the most susceptible to social media, right? Her age brought her into the time of Snapchat and TikTok and all of the above. The other kids were too old for it at that point. They didn't have the same interest. Not that they don't now, even as adults, because it changed. But that's where the depression stemmed from, the body dysmorphia. People, the idea that at your age, at 13 years old, that you should be some kind of a rock star, right? And that's where it started for her. I work really closely with Alexander Neville Foundation and also Boyd Victims of Illicit Drugs, and they work a lot on the social media issues and have taught us so much. The idea that your son or daughter could go onto their phone and see entire drug menus of all these kitschy little pills and emojis and all of these things that look harmless, and just purchased right there without your knowledge. No parental control. And we know organizations like SNAP put out new safety measures, right? Well, I don't think they're doing anything because we are still losing kids at a faster rate than we were before they put these safety measures out. So is that really safe? Is there enough being done? If somebody called me right now and said your website is, responsible for killing a child, I would pull my website from one child, much less hundreds and hundreds of children. So these things have to be addressed. And, there's even, we're the national day that's in August. There's another one that's in May. We just had it. And most people don't know, including our law enforcement people that put the information out for this National Fentanyl Awareness Day. Its founder is Snapchat. So, it's like many other things. It's a ruse. A lot of this is a ruse, and things get covered up. And so we have to pay attention. And we aren't a society that really does that anymore. We don't pay attention to a lot of things that don't affect us. What you're going to do about that, I don't know. But I'm telling you that if you have a child or young people, nieces, nephews, whatever, or you're using recreationally yourself, get the facts about fentanyl, because there's no do-over. It's one chance. If you know about fentanyl, share what you know. You don't have to know everything about fentanyl. You just have to share what you know. Alexander Neville Foundation, I'm taking that quote from them because they say that all the time, but it's true. Share what you know. It can save a life, something very simple.
Are you happy with the amount of public messaging we're seeing now?
No. In Colorado, I'm seeing messaging about safe use. So they're not talking about abstinence. They're not talking about prevention. And I've been in those meetings. I'm a stakeholder to those meetings. And the target age for their messaging, I believe, was like 24 to 36 or something like that. And we know it's 18 to 45 were the ages that we were using, and now our 14 and under. It's all the ages. But their take on this was to talk about safe use. So fentanyl strips, keep the party safe. That's a bunch of baloney to me. We are giving our kids a false sense of security, telling them that if they use a fentanyl test strip, they're good. They're good to go. I was down in Larimer Square in downtown Denver last year, and some kids were in Union Square, and they were coming out 16th Street Mall, all dressed up and pretty from some prom or dance that they had. And I'm handing out fentanyl awareness bracelets and saying, you guys look like you're going to party tonight. Be safe. Don't trust anything out there. Please, please, please. And this beautiful young boy says to me, "Ma'am, I don't use cocaine." And I said, "It's not just in cocaine. It's in everything. Somebody could have even put it in your marijuana, even though nobody wants to give this information out." So he says, "Well, if I did use, I would test it." And I said, "Do you know how to test? Do you know that all drugs test differently? And that's not 100% full, safe, proof way for you to stay alive." And his girlfriend hit him on his shoulder and said, "See, I told you so."
Yeah.
They had this conversation before.
Sure.
We shouldn't be, it's certainly, the tools are good. All tools are good to have in your toolbox if you're going to use, and there's something that can maybe help you. But the only sure way to stay alive is not to use this or even go there in the first place.
And if you have what you think is an Adderall, what's a test strip going to do? You have to know how to chip the pill, mix it with water, and then test it. And most people don't know that, or they're not going to do that. Test strip work without.
We've done focus groups, right? County focus group to talk to people that are using it, the Suboxone clinics or the methadone clinics. And the users are telling us, we don't use these test strips. Why would we do that? Why would we use up our drugs to test them? It's all they can do to get the drugs. Right. So, and it's not a real thing. This is not reality. It's not the best way to go about this. And so we've got to really work towards prevention instead of compliance and accommodate people that are using. We've got to offer them real help and get prevention to our kids to at least make an educated decision. We're going to save more than we're not going to save, right? We're not going to save them all by giving them this information, but we are going to save a lot of, if they just knew that one time could kill them.
Well, it seems the balance of influence is definitely moving more in the direction of the harm reductionists, many of whom I've talked to who are all for drug legalization, and they don't call it, encouragement or enabling. They just say we're meeting a person where he's at, he or she where they're at, and we're just helping them get through the day with no additional long-term treatment. They seem to be getting the bulk of the opioid use money to do these harm reduction programs. Are you working with any harm reduction groups, or is there, I don't want to say conflict, but is there a strong difference of opinion on methodology?
Very strong difference of opinion. I have, asked many times to be included in those conversations to get that point of view, right? I want to hear. I might not agree with you, but I want to hear. Maybe something will strike a chord in me. Maybe together we can come up with a better solution, right? If we can hear each other and be open to it. Most of the time, we're not in, we're not wanted in those conversations. Legislation in Colorado, that was a great part of it. Harm reduction was the other side. And we were pitted against each other immediately going into these rooms for legislation or to testify. Why is that? We have the same goal to save lives. And so I would love to sit at the table with the same people and be open, not just to argue, but to really be open and see what the other side sounds like. I remember being in one of the stakeholders meeting early on in this when I first lost Ashley. And there was a mother there that was talking about safe needle sites and Suboxone and methadone. And I asked her, why would you make that choice for your child, right? Why do you think that's a good idea? And what she told me was that's all she had at that point. That we didn't have anything else. So if that's all she could do to keep her kid alive for the next week, that's the choice that she was forced to make. I understand that. I can understand that you want to keep your child alive. So that's not so far removed from my thinking. That was her child, not mine. And again, until it happens to you, you sometimes don't know or don't even look. So if we work together, maybe we can come up with something better. You will see the division out there in the work that we do. You'll even see division out there in affected family groups because some of them don't even talk about recovery or addiction, and that's their prerogative. That's their choice to make. But we're not bad because we do. We're just talking about other issues and including recovery, and it's worked for us to reach other people. So we're in a new time. We've got to work together and that all hands on deck. This isn't a political issue. This is a red, white, and blue. That really, really is the truth. But reality is that the wheels that keep everything running sometimes aren't going to stop these drugs that are coming into the United States. And, we've got an administration right now that I don't like to talk about our administration, our politics, but really we have an administration that's in a great position to take their family experience, turn it around into the best drug prevention campaign that was ever out there. If they would just...
You certainly see how that was glossed over very quickly. Anybody else you would... like I said, we don't want to get too political, but I understand exactly where you're coming from with that quote. But it's very hard not to get political when it's the politics that are making the decisions that are killing the individuals indirectly. It's decisions that are allowing the border to be open, when drugs come across indirectly. The DEA and state and local law enforcement can only use the constitutional powers they have. They're doing everything they can do. But again, if you have progressive DAs who are prosecuting, rates of recidivism are high to keep incarcerations low, now you get into the politics of equity and incarceration, which is a big motivation why so many people are not getting arrested that are dealing drugs, right? And then you get into the colorage. Is it racist? Is it discriminatory? All these other political issues cloud the field and make it difficult to come to some sort of revolution or not revolution, but some kind of conclusion, I would say. Well, we only have a few minutes left, Andrea. Is there an email or a way people can contact you at Awareness Foundation?
Yes. So voicescoreawareness.com and facingfentanylnow.org are our websites. A lot of information about fentanyl on facingfentanylnow.org. And you'll also find many other groups like mine, right? Awareness groups from all over the United States. You can link to them there. So if you find someone in your area or something or organization that sounds like you could work with, well, reach out to them. That's why they're there. My personal email is andrea@voicesforawareness.com. And we've got a lot of projects coming up, a lot of good work, and we're always looking for people and open to ideas. And so reach out to us. And if you are a family member that has suffered a loss like this, there's hundreds of thousands of us out there. And so you can find support within our groups. And we're always willing to listen and offer lend a helping hand if we can help in any way.
Well, again, Andrea, thank you for your time. We've been with Andrea Thompson, co-founder of Voices for Awareness Foundation. Definitely reach out to her if you have any questions on fentanyl and what it can do, because it could be the life you save. Andrea, again, thank you for coming on the Opioid Matrix.
Thank you, Michael.
Rigaku Analytical Devices is a U.S.-based manufacturer of advanced analytical equipment for the identification of unknown substances. Utilizing Raman in our devices means we can non-destructively scan through packaging with a result of identification in less than 1 minute. Rigaku is committed to supporting and partnering with your agency to tackle this problem together. To learn more, visit rigakuanalytical.com. Thank you for joining host Michael Brown for this episode of the Opioid Matrix, a journey into the rabbit hole, a Rigaku podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show on your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show. No matter the controversy around the illegal drug supply chain, our mission is to save lives. Thanks for listening. Until next time.